I am 70 years old, and last night as I sat at the dinner table in the very apartment my son and his wife call their own, my daughter-in-law looked at me with eyes colder than stone and told me I was useless, nothing but a burden, a shadow that lingered long after its time. She did not whisper it. She did not soften it. She said it with the sharpness of a blade, her voice steady, her lips curled in contempt, as though she were cutting through meat. My son, my only son, the boy I raised with these two hands, the man I once believed would carry my name with pride, sat there beside her. He did not flinch, did not defend me, did not even blink. He let the words land like stones against my chest. He let her mock me, strip me of my dignity, and he ate his food as though nothing had happened. I sat in silence, though inside me something burned hotter than fire. They thought I was finished, a relic of the past, a weak old man who had nothing left but years of decay. They thought I had no power, no value, no voice. They thought I was broke. What they did not know, what they could not even imagine, was that the roof above their heads, the very walls that surrounded us that night, the apartment they decorated to show off to their friends, the address they used as a badge of pride, did not belong to them. It belonged to me. They had forgotten, or maybe they had never cared to know. They saw me in my worn sweater, my quiet manner, my thin frame, and they assumed I was clinging to them like a parasite. They did not realize that without me, without the paper I hold in a safe place, they would be standing outside in the street with nothing but the clothes on their backs. They thought I was weak, but I was the landlord all along. I will never forget the way her words echoed in my mind. You are nothing but a burden. For a moment, it felt like my heart stopped, like all the air was sucked out of the room. My hands trembled under the table, not with fear, but with rage I fought to control. She smiled as if she had won, as if she had crushed me under her heel. My son's silence was worse than her insult. His silence screamed betrayal louder than any words could. For decades, I believed I had raised a man with respect, a man who understood the value of sacrifice, a man who would stand tall beside his father. But last night, all I saw was a stranger who allowed his wife to humiliate the man who gave him life. Tell me, what would you do, sitting there with your dignity shredded by those you fed, those you clothed, those you gave shelter to? Would you have exploded in anger, thrown the truth in their faces, told them that every brick in that apartment was yours, that every moment of comfort they lived came from your sweat and your sacrifice? Or would you have done what I did, remain silent? Let them choke on their arrogance. Let them build a tower of pride so tall that when the truth came crashing down, it would destroy them completely. I kept my lips sealed, though every part of me screamed to speak. I watched them. My daughter-in-law, so confident, so cruel, thinking she had cut me down for good. My son, his eyes fixed on his plate, his shame hidden behind cowardice. I let the silence linger, stretching longer and longer, until the only sounds in the room were the clinking of cutlery and the faint hum of the ceiling light. The air grew heavy, and though they believed they had defeated me, I sat there holding a secret more powerful than their insults could ever be. The truth is, I have played this role before. People look at me and see weakness. They see wrinkles, gray hair, slow steps, and they think age has stripped me of all strength. But what they do not see are the years of sacrifice, the decades of work, the quiet investments, the choices I made when I was younger, that built the foundation for the life they now take for granted. They do not know that I prepared for this moment long before they were even born. They do not know that I hold the power to change their lives with one stroke of a pen. And yet I ask myself, why did I not speak in that moment? Why did I not reveal the truth, throw it across the table like a thunderbolt, and watch their faces crumble? Perhaps it was because I wanted them to reveal themselves fully. Perhaps it was because silence is its own kind of weapon, sharper than words, more devastating than rage. In silence, I watch their true selves crawl out of the shadows, bare and ugly. And when the time comes, when I choose to reveal the truth, there will be no doubt, no excuse, no way to twist the story. So, I leave the question with you. If you were in my place sitting in the home you secretly own, being called useless by those who depend on you, would you have spoken the truth right there, or would you have waited as I did? Comment 1 if you would have stayed silent and let them drown in arrogance, or comment 0 if you would have crushed them immediately with the truth. There was a time when my life was not filled with bitterness, when the walls of this same apartment echoed with laughter instead of venom. To understand why my silence at that dinner table carried such weight, You need to know what it used to be like before betrayal seeped into every crack of my family. I was not always an old man with trembling hands. I was once a husband, a father, a provider, and a man who carried dreams larger than himself. I met my wife when I was 23. Her name was Clara, and she had the kind of smile that made the world stop. She believed in me when I was nothing but a young man with calloused palms and a heart full of ambition. Together, we built a life brick by brick. I worked double shifts, sometimes 3, in factories that smelled of oil and smoke. She stayed up late sewing clothes, sometimes by candlelight, when the electricity cut out, humming lullabies, even when there was no child yet to hear them. We were not rich, not even close, but we were rich in faith, rich in hope, rich in love. When our son was born, I remember holding him in my arms for the first time. He was so small, so fragile, yet I felt a surge of strength unlike anything before. I promised Clara, and I promised him, that no matter what, I would build a future strong enough to protect them both. Every long day of labor, every ache in my bones, every sleepless night was worth it because it was for them. And Clara, she never doubted me. Her hands touched mine every morning before I left for work. Her voice carried me through the hardest days. We built a partnership that was unshakable, or so I thought. As years passed, we managed to save enough to buy our first small apartment. It was not much, just a modest place with cracked tiles and thin walls, but it was ours. I remember the pride in Clara's eyes when she held the keys. I told her it was only the beginning, and I was right. From that moment forward, I learned to live with less, to save every coin, to invest in opportunities others were too blind or too impatient to see. Piece by piece, property by property, I built something lasting. No one in the family ever asked how I did it, and I never boasted, never flaunted. I kept it quiet, like a secret seed planted deep in the soil. To my son, I was just dad. To Clara, I was her partner, and in those years I believed that was enough. I did not need the world to know my sacrifices. I only needed my family to live safe and well. We ate dinners together at that same table, but back then it was filled with warmth. Clara would bring out her stew, the smell of herbs filling the room. My son would tell stories from school, his eyes bright, his laugh pure. I would sit there listening, sometimes exhausted, but always proud. There was a night I remember clearly, one that still plays in my mind like a film. My son must have been 12. We had nothing fancy for dinner, just bread, a little cheese, and Clara's stew. He looked at me and said, "Dad, when I grow up, I want to be like you. I want to work hard and take care of my family the way you take care of us." Those words, simple as they were, carried me through the darkest days. They were proof that my sacrifices were not invisible. At least back then. When Clara grew ill, everything changed. The woman who had been the light of our home grew weaker with each passing day. I watched helplessly as her body betrayed her, though her spirit never did. She would take my hand and whisper, "Promise me you'll look after him. Promise me you'll make sure he never forgets where he came from." I promised. I swore on my life. And when she passed the silence in, the house was deafening. My son and I clung to each other, and I thought that bond forged in grief would never break. I remember him as a young man standing tall at his graduation, shaking my hand with pride. I remember helping him move into his first job, giving him advice he swore he would never forget. I remember thinking Clara would be proud that her dream for him was alive. In those years, there was no sign of the coldness that now poisons his heart. There were no sharp words from him, no mocking from the woman he would later marry. Back then, I believed the love we shared as father and son was unshakable. That is why the insult at the dinner table was more than just words. It was betrayal, because I had built my entire life on the foundation of love and duty, only to see it mocked and dismissed. They did not know, and perhaps they never cared to know, the sacrifices buried under the floor they walk on every day. They did not know that Clara's final request still burns inside me, and I will not let her down, no matter how much they spit in my face. So, when I sat there last night silent as my daughter-in-law tried to strip me of my dignity, I was not just an old man beaten by time. I was the same man who once carried his wife through storms, the same man who built a home from nothing, the same man who swore a promise on Clara's deathbed. They forgot who I was, but I did not. Tell me, do you still believe that promises made in love are worth keeping even when the people you keep them for turn their backs on you? Comment, yes. If you believe loyalty must remain, or comment. No, if you think betrayal erases every vow. It did not happen overnight. Betrayal rarely does. It starts small, like a hairline crack in the wall, barely visible, so easy to ignore. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. I wanted to believe my son still respected me, that his wife's smile was genuine, that the warmth of family still lived in that apartment. But little by little, the signs grew sharper, and my silence grew heavier. The first sign was money. For years, I had helped them, quietly slipping bills into my son's hand when he was short, paying off small debts before collectors could come knocking, covering emergencies that seemed endless when they first married. He used to thank me, his eyes filled with gratitude. But then, the thanks stopped. The money was expected like air or water. One month, he asked for help with rent. The next, with a car payment. Then there were the credit card bills, the vacations they claimed. They had to take the new furniture they needed. When I asked where their own money was going, he would laugh it off, tell me not to worry. I wanted to believe him, so I stayed quiet. Then there were the whispers. I would pass by their room late at night and hear my name in hushed tones, always followed by laughter. Once I heard her say, "Don't worry, he'll never say no. He's too soft." Another time she said, "As long as he thinks we respect him, he'll keep paying." I froze in the hallway, my heart pounding in my ears. I wanted to storm in to shout that I heard everything, but I swallowed the pain and went back to bed. Silence was easier, or at least that's what I told myself. And then came the looks, small things, but they cut deep. When I asked a question, she would roll her eyes. When I joined them for dinner, she would sigh loudly as though my presence was an inconvenience. When I offered advice, my son would smirk, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. "Times are different now, Dad," he would say. "You don't understand how things work anymore." Those words stung more than he knew. Did he forget the roof over his head, the food on his plate, the foundation of everything he had came from me? Or did he just choose to forget? One afternoon, I overheard her talking to a friend on the phone. I was in the kitchen washing a cup when she said, "I can't stand having him around. He's so old. He doesn't belong here. Sometimes I wish he'd just go away." Her friend laughed and she laughed with her. My hands shook so badly the cup slipped and shattered in the sink. She didn't notice. She never did. Another time, I noticed small things disappearing from my room. A watch Clara gave me on our 10th anniversary. A pen I had carried for decades. An old coin collection my father left me. When I asked, my son claimed he had no idea. But later, I saw one of those coins on his desk, next to receipts I didn't recognize. He didn't even bother to hide it. I wanted to ask him why, but the words got stuck in my throat. I told myself it was only things, only objects, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. It was respect slipping through my fingers. The final red flag came when they began discussing me as though I were not in the room. We were sitting in the living room one evening, the television flickering, when she turned to him and said, "How long are we going to keep this up? He can't stay here forever." My son glanced at me, then at her, and shrugged. "We'll figure it out," he said. They thought I couldn't hear, but I did. I heard every word. I sat there in my chair, invisible in my own home, wondering how we had come to this. Do you know what it feels like to watch your own blood treat you like a burden? To hear your daughter-in-law, the woman you welcomed into your family, speak of you as if you are nothing but dead weight. To watch your son, the boy you carried on your shoulders, sit there and let it happen. It is like drowning, slowly gasping for air, while the people you love push your head deeper into the water. Still, I said nothing. I told myself that families go through difficult times, that maybe they were stressed, that maybe they would come to their senses. I reminded myself of Clara's words of her dying request, that I always look after him. I wanted to honor that promise, even if it meant swallowing my pride, even if it meant letting their cruelty pierce me again and again. But the truth is, silence does not protect you forever. Silence only feeds the fire. The more I stayed quiet, the bolder they became. The more I endured, the less they respected me. And though I tried to convince myself I could bear it, I knew deep down that something was about to break. Tell me, would you have spoken up at the first red flag, when the whispers began, when the gratitude turned to entitlement, when the objects began to vanish? Or would you have done what I did, clinging to silence in the hope that love would return? Comment 9, if you would have confronted them early. Or comment okay, if you would have endured in silence like I did. I always believed the worst pain a father could endure was watching his child suffer. I was wrong. The worst pain is discovering that your child, the very one you sacrificed everything for, is capable of conspiring against you. That night, when the truth revealed itself, it did not come as a scream or a slap. It came as a whisper behind a half-closed door, a whisper that shattered whatever illusions I had left. It was late. I had gone to bed early, but sleep refused to come. My bones ached the way they always did when the weather turned cold, so I shuffled to the kitchen for a glass of water. As I passed the living room, I noticed their voices low, tense, urgent. My instinct told me to keep walking, but something in their tone froze me in place. I leaned against the wall, holding my breath, and listened. "We can't wait any longer," she hissed. "He's stubborn, but he'll never leave on his own. We need the house. We need it now." My heart nearly stopped. The house. The home Clara and I built brick by brick, the walls that had heard our laughter, the kitchen where I taught my son to tie his shoelaces, the garden where Clara's roses still bloomed. That house was more than walls and furniture. It was my life. And here they were, speaking of it as if it were a prize to be seized. My son's voice came next, softer, but no less cruel. "I know, but if we push too hard, he'll suspect. Just give me time. I'll convince him to sign it over. Once the deed is in our name, he won't matter." Convince me. My knees trembled so badly I had to grip the wall to steady myself. For months I had been telling myself that the disrespect, the cold stares, the endless criticism were born from stress. But now I understood. It was not stress. It was strategy. Every sigh, every insult, every dismissal was designed to weaken me, to make me doubt myself, until one day I would surrender the only thing I had left: my home. Vivian's voice sharpened, cutting through the silence like a knife. "What if he refuses? He's old, but he's not stupid. What if he figures out what we're doing?" My son laughed then. A laugh I barely recognized. "He won't. He still thinks I'm that little boy who cries on his shoulder. He can't see me for what I am now. Trust me, he'll sign." That laugh broke something inside me. I had thought the whispers, the missing objects, the rolled eyes were the deepest betrayal. But this was different. This was not carelessness. This was premeditated. My own flesh and blood, plotting to strip me of the last piece of dignity I had. I pressed my back to the wall, my heart pounding. I wanted to burst into the room, to confront them, to scream that I had heard everything. But instead, I crept back to my bedroom, sat on the edge of my bed, and let the truth wash over me. The boy I raised, the man I called son, was preparing to erase me from my own life. I remembered Clara's voice the night before she died. She held my hand, her skin paper thin, her eyes filled with love. "Take care of him," she whispered. "Promise me you'll never give up on him." I had promised. God help me, I had promised. And because of that promise, I had blinded myself to who he had become. Do you know what it feels like to realize the enemy is not outside your home, but within it? To realize that the people you feed, the people you clothe, the people you shelter, are plotting to leave you homeless. It is a betrayal so profound it feels like poison in your veins. The next morning I tried to act normal. I poured coffee, greeted them with the same tired smile, and listened to their idle chatter. But inside, I was watching every glance, every word, every movement. I noticed how she placed her hand on his arm possessively, how he avoided meeting my eyes, how they exchanged quick looks whenever I mentioned the house. The truth had infected everything. Later that week, I found documents hidden in my son's desk. Draft papers, real estate brochures, even a copy of the deed to my house. My name was still on it, but there were notes scribbled in the margins, arrows pointing to where signatures would go. Calculations of potential sale value. My stomach turned. It was no longer suspicion. It was proof. That night I stood alone in the garden. Clara loved so much staring at the roses she had planted. Their petals glowed faintly in the moonlight, fragile but stubborn, clinging to life despite the season. I felt a strange calm settle over me. I realized silence had gone on long enough. The red flags were no longer warnings. They were weapons aimed directly at me. And now, armed with the truth, I had a choice. I could surrender, or I could fight. But I will tell you something. A man who has lived through war, through hunger, through burying the love of his life, does not surrender easily. They thought I was weak because my hair is gray, because my hands shake, because my back bends. But they forgot something I have survived too much to be broken by greed. Tell me, what would you do if you overheard your own blood conspiring to take the roof over your head? Would you confront them immediately, or would you wait, gather proof, and strike when the moment was right? Comment, yes, if you would confront them right then. Or comment 1 if you would bide your time and let them reveal themselves fully. Once you hear the truth, once the veil is lifted, you cannot unsee it. Every word, every gesture, every look takes on a new meaning. After that night, when I overheard their whispers about taking my house, nothing was the same. I became an actor in my own home, playing the role of the quiet, senile old man, while inside, I measured every step, every sentence, every sign of betrayal. The air in the apartment grew heavier with each passing day, as if the walls themselves were waiting for the explosion. It began with subtle pressure. My son came to me one afternoon, papers in his hand, his smile too rehearsed. "Dad," he said, "I was thinking, maybe it's time to put the house under my name just for safety. You know you're getting older. Anything can happen, and it'll save us trouble later." His tone was casual, but his eyes betrayed impatience. I looked at the papers at the blank lines waiting for my signature, and I felt the weight of every sacrifice I had ever made pressing down on me. He thought I would just sign that I was too weak, too blind to see what was happening. I slid the papers back to him and said nothing. The silence unsettled him more than any refusal could. Then the arguments began, little things that grew into storms. My daughter-in-law complained about the groceries, about the electricity bills, about the way I used too much hot water. She said I was draining their resources as if I were some stranger freeloading off their kindness. My son joined her chorus, raising his voice, pointing his finger, saying I didn't understand how expensive life was now. I listened, always calm, letting them spit their venom, knowing the truth they didn't. The whispers turned to confrontations. One evening as we sat down to dinner, she slammed her fork on the table and said, "You can't keep living here like this. We need space. You need to think about moving out." My son didn't stop her. He looked at me, almost daring me to resist his silence louder than her outburst. I looked at both of them and felt the fury boiling inside me, but I swallowed it, saving it for the day they would least expect. The tension spread beyond words. I noticed more things disappearing. My documents were moved, my safe tampered with. Once I caught her in my room, pretending to tidy up, but her hands rifling through my drawers. She froze when she saw me, then smiled that practiced smile. "Just cleaning, Dad," she said, but I knew better. Another night, I woke to the sound of footsteps outside my bedroom door. The handle turned slowly, then stopped. They were testing me, waiting for me to fall asleep forever, waiting for their chance. I began to hear their plans more clearly. They did not even bother to hide their conversations anymore. She said, "If he doesn't sign soon, maybe we need to push harder. He can't live forever." He replied, "Patience. The old man will break. They always do." I clenched my fists until my nails cut my skin, reminding myself not to storm into the room, not to reveal that I knew everything. Rage is a weapon, but patience is sharper. But patience does not erase the pain. Every day felt like a battlefield. The home I had built with Clara's love turned into a prison filled with enemies wearing familiar faces. Meals became confrontations. Nights became interrogations. My every move was questioned, my every word twisted. I lived under siege, surrounded not by strangers, but by blood and marriage. And still I endured. One Sunday they invited friends over. I sat in the corner, quiet and visible, while they laughed and boasted about their life. My daughter-in-law pointed at the apartment and said, "Our place is finally coming together. We're thinking of renovating soon, maybe even selling and moving to a bigger one." Their friends congratulated them, clinking glasses, praising their success. Not one of them knew the truth. I clenched my jaw, listening, burning. They celebrated as though I were already dead, as though I had never existed. The disrespect reached its peak when my son, the boy I once held in my arms, looked me in the eye one evening and said, "Dad, maybe it's time you stop being so stubborn. Why don't you do the right thing and sign the papers? Make things easier for everyone." The words "do the right thing" sliced me deeper than a knife. To him, the right thing was to erase myself, to hand over everything I had bled for. I wanted to shout, to remind him of Clara's dying wish, of the nights I worked myself to exhaustion, of the shoes I bought him when I had none for myself. But I stayed quiet. My silence was my shield. My silence was the trap. The atmosphere grew unbearable. They stopped pretending to respect me. She snapped at me openly, calling me old man instead of dad. He raised his voice more often, his eyes cold, his patience gone. They thought they had broken me. They thought I was cornered, defenseless, ready to surrender. But inside, I was sharpening my resolve. Every insult, every threat, every stolen moment was fuel for the fire that would one day consume them. Do you know what it feels like to live among enemies you once called family? To eat at the same table with those who plot your ruin? To lie awake at night listening for the sound of betrayal creeping closer? It is madness, it is torture, and yet it is clarity. Because now I knew exactly who they were, and I knew exactly what I had to do. Tell me, if you were surrounded like this, if your own blood pushed you to the edge, would you have erupted in fury and thrown them out? Or would you have waited silent until the perfect moment to strike back? Comment 8 if you would explode with rage, or comment. Wait if you would hold your fire like I did. There comes a point when silence is no longer strength but surrender. I had endured enough, and the night of reckoning arrived sooner than they expected. It was a Sunday evening, the air thick with the smell of roasted meat and cheap wine. They had invited friends again, flaunting their false success, parading me like some relic in the corner. I sat at the head of the table, the place Clara once reserved for me, with pride, but now it felt like a cage. Their laughter echoed through the walls, each sound a hammer striking my dignity. She poured herself another glass of wine, and in front of everyone turned to me. "You should be grateful we let you stay here. Not everyone would tolerate an old man eating off their plates." The table erupted in awkward laughter. My son smirked, not once defending me. I saw it then, this was the moment they wanted. To humiliate me publicly, to break me beyond repair, to push me into surrendering the last piece of myself I had left. I placed my fork down slowly, the clatter louder than the laughter. The room fell into an uneasy silence. My heart pounded in my chest, not with fear, but with a fire I had kept hidden for too long. I looked at her first, then at my son, and finally at every face around that table. My voice was calm, steady, but it cut through the air like thunder. "You think I am here because of your kindness? You think I am weak, a burden surviving on your mercy? Let me remind you, this roof, these walls, this home you brag about to your friends, none of it is yours. Every brick, every tile, every inch belongs to me." The color drained from her face. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. My son shifted uncomfortably, his smirk vanishing. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the deed, the very document they had tried to steal, the papers with my name etched in ink that could not be erased. I laid it on the table like a sword drawn from its sheath. Gasps filled the room. This house, I continued, my voice rising with every word, was built on my sweat, my sacrifice, my blood. You sit here mocking me, planning behind closed doors to take what you did not earn, and you forget who I am. I am not a burden. I am not useless. I am the man who made you, who carried you, who buried his wife while swearing to protect you. And this I said, slamming my hand on the deed, is the proof that you live in my shadow, not the other way around. The silence that followed was suffocating. No one dared to speak. Her eyes darted to my son, desperate, pleading. He finally found his voice, but it trembled. "Dad, it's not what you think." "Not what I think," I roared, standing now, my chair scraping against the floor. "I heard you. Every word I know about your whispers in the night. Your plans to steal what does not belong to you. Your laughter when you thought I was deaf. You conspired against your own father, the man who gave you life. And you," I turned to her, my eyes burning into hers, "you called me a burden, an old man who doesn't belong. Yet you live off me, off my name, off the home my wife and I built with love. You spit on my dignity and call it mercy." She stammered, her voice breaking. "We just wanted a better future." "A better future," I thundered, "by destroying your past, by erasing the very foundation that gave you everything. A future built on betrayal is no future at all. It is a curse." The room was still. No one touched their food. No one breathed too loudly. My son's friends exchanged nervous glances, shifting in their seats, realizing they had been celebrating lies. My son lowered his head, his hands trembling. For the first time, I saw shame in his eyes. But shame was not enough. "You will not take this house from me," I declared, my voice steady again, cold as steel. "You will not erase me, not while I still draw breath. From this day forward, you will respect the roof you live under, or you will leave it. But one thing is certain, you will never own it. Not now, not ever." She began to cry, tears streaking down her painted face, but I felt no pity. She had laughed when she thought I was weak. She had mocked me when I stayed silent. Now she saw the truth. I was not broken. I was not finished. I was the landlord. I turned to my son one last time. "I promised your mother I would protect you, and I have. But you," my voice cracked, anger and sorrow, mingling, "you betrayed me, betrayed her memory. You are my greatest failure, and until the day you earn back the name of son, you will look at me and see the man you tried to destroy, but could not." I left the table then, the deed in my hand, my back straight, my steps firm. Behind me, the silence was absolute. They had wanted a spectacle, and they got one, but not the kind they expected. They thought they would see me broken. Instead, they saw me rise. Tell me, if you had been in my place facing betrayal at your own table, would you have unleashed the truth like I did? Or would you have walked away silently, letting them drown in their own lies? Comment fight if you would confront them, or comment. Leave if you would turn your back forever. After that night, nothing was the same inside those walls. The silence that followed my outburst was not the same silence I had endured before. It was heavier, sharper, the kind that cuts deep, because it carries the weight of truth. My daughter-in-law avoided my eyes for days. Her arrogance shattered her laughter, replaced by whispers of regret. She moved through the apartment like a ghost, stripped of the false power she once wielded. My son, my own blood, could barely look at me. When he did, I saw not the pride of a man, not even the defiance of an enemy, but the hollow shame of someone who had finally seen the monster in his own reflection. They stopped inviting friends. They stopped boasting about their home. The arguments died on their tongues before they could be spoken. For the first time in months, maybe years, the apartment felt still. But it was not peace. It was the calm after a storm, the kind that leaves debris scattered across the land. Nothing would grow the same again. In the days that followed, I thought of Clara often. I would sit in the garden, her roses blooming as stubbornly as ever, and I would speak to her in whispers only the dead can hear. I kept my promise, I told her. I protected him even when he turned against me. I showed him the truth. But, oh, Clara, what a bitter truth it was. I imagined her hand in mine, her voice telling me I had done enough, that I had carried the burden farther than any man should. My son tried once to speak. He came into the garden where I sat, his steps slow, his shoulders bent as though carrying invisible chains. He stood behind me for a long time before he said, "Dad, I'm sorry." The words hung in the air, trembling, fragile. I did not turn to face him. I let the silence answer. Because an apology without change is just another lie, and I had lived among lies for too long. He walked away, his footsteps fading, and I felt both sorrow and relief. Vivian, for all her sharp tongue, broke faster. She tried to smile at me, tried to resume her role as the respectful daughter-in-law, but her eyes betrayed her. She had been exposed. There is no recovering from that. Once a mask is torn, it cannot be worn again. She moved through the house carefully, no longer daring to raise her voice, no longer daring to roll her eyes. She had tasted fear, the fear of losing everything, and it silenced her better than any words of mine ever could. And me, I did not gloat. I did not celebrate. I did not need to. My dignity was restored, not because I crushed them, but because I refused to surrender. In a world that wants old men to fade quietly into shadows, I had stood in the light and declared, I am still here. That was enough. I realized something in those quiet days. Wealth can be stolen. Respect can be eroded. Even family can betray you. But dignity belongs only to the one who refuses to let it go. That night at the table, when I laid down the deed and told the truth, I reclaimed more than a house. I reclaimed myself. I do not know what the future holds for my son and his wife. Perhaps they will change. Perhaps they will not. Perhaps one day my son will remember the boy who once told me he wanted to be like me. Perhaps he will understand that strength is not measured by what you take, but by what you protect. Perhaps. But until then, I live my days knowing I did not break. I live my days knowing Clara's promise was not in vain. To those who hear my story, to those who sit in silence as others try to strip them of their worth, I say this silence is powerful. But there comes a time when truth must be spoken. When that moment arrives, do not hesitate. Stand tall, even if your back is bent, even if your hair is gray, even if the world thinks you are finished. Dignity is not given, it is claimed. And now, I leave you with one final question. If your own blood betrayed you, if the people you fed turned against you, if the home you built with love became a battlefield of greed, would you have had the courage to rise and speak the truth? Comment justice. If you believe in reclaiming dignity, or comment. 9. If you would still remain silent, waiting for the world to see on its own.